In a world increasingly shaped by technology, the HumanUp imperative explores the significance of human connection with each other, with the communities we serve, and perhaps most importantly, with ourselves. Join Rex Wallace and his guests as they discuss the ever-important role of authentic, meaningful connection in healthcare. It's time to HumanUp.
Hey everyone, short special episode today. As we wrap up 2025, I want to reflect back on the HumanUp imperative. I remember a few months ago, actually it was on April 21st, I reached out to Stefan, my producer, and I said, hey, can we chat about an idea I have for a new podcast? I felt like it was a podcast we were missing, one where we could go beyond tactics and focus on what I believe is the root cause of every problem that we have in life, personal or professional, and that's connection. Connection with other humans, connection with our communities, even connection with ourselves, as we've talked about in some of the episodes. So Stefan challenged me as we developed this concept, as we thought about topics, recruited guests. And the more I dug into this, the more I realized that it actually is very tactical. I don't think you succeed in leading a cross-functional program like Medicare Star Ratings or any other line of business quality improvement program without this. If you don't improve at this, it's everything. I believe wholeheartedly that human connection is the most important thing that we face in life. And it's important to be successful in business too. And look, I don't have it figured out. If you've watched the episodes, you know that I've shared a few things that make it pretty obvious that I don't have it figured out. I don't think anyone has it figured out. I screw it up every single day. But I want to have these conversations. I want to have these conversations with people who also don't have it all figured out, but they're thinking about it and they're focused on improving certain aspects of it that are so important for all of us. My first guest was literally the first guest I thought of when I started thinking of this concept. As soon as this idea came to me, I knew I wanted him as my first guest, and that was Todd Ray. So episode 1 was Todd Ray, who's one of the best examples I know of an executive sponsoring any cross-functional program like Medicare Star Ratings. He's calm, he's confident, he's not afraid to ask the stupidest question, as he even says. As far as a favorite quote from the Todd Ray episode, there's lots to choose from, but I'm going to go with, no matter how bad things are, if you work the problem and you break it down into smaller components, you're going to make progress, and you'll see the progress, and progress begets more progress because it gives you hope. The book, I ask every guest, what's one book everyone should read? Todd Ray said Endurance. It's the true story of Ernest Shackleton's 1915 expedition, where 28 men trapped in the frozen seas of Antarctica for more than a year. And against impossible odds, every single one of them survived. There's a quote in the book that says, of all their enemies, the cold, the ice, the sea, he feared none more than demoralization. Shackleton, he knew the elements were brutal, but his greatest fear was losing his crew's spirit. Exceptional leaders are like that. They see the obstacles in front of their teams, but they focus even more on what's inside the team. They guard morale like it's oxygen. They find ways to restore belief and keep demoralization at bay. I think we can learn from that, especially in these cross-functional programs that we're leading in business, but really in every aspect of life. Episode 2 was Todd Deathridge. Another Todd, don't get confused. Todd Deathridge, one of my favorite humans on the planet. I've known Todd since birth. He's actually my first cousin. We grew up in the same small town, 56, Arkansas, and Todd is now a global peacemaker. We actually walk through the 6 peacemaking principles, the 6 peacemaking practices. The key takeaway from our discussion for me is that, our goal should be really to create a world where everyone flourishes. And to do that, we have to start by working on ourselves, before we can ever hope to influence anyone else. My favorite quote from Todd Deathridge was this: but my best ability to bring change is to make sure I'm being as healthy as I can be, and that my team, my community, my political tribe is holding itself to its own values and trying to not be hypocritical and to live out what we're trying to do and to do it in a generative way. Todd recommended a book called Small Things Like These. I'd never heard of it, but I went and found it and I read it. It's a short book, and it is the only book I've ever finished and immediately reread it a second time because I didn't want to miss anything because it was so powerful. Highly, highly, highly recommend small things like these if you're looking for a book. And it's a perfect read for the holidays too. Puts you in the spirit and gives you a lot of hope. And it's short. Episode 3, Sean Lancaster, another person that I've known since birth. Sean's actually, been one of my best friends since we were toddlers. Sean's a mechanical engineer turned fitness guru and now founder. The takeaway from this episode, this is one where we're really focused internally, right, on connecting with ourselves. But the takeaway really that taking care of ourselves and pushing ourselves makes us into the best version of ourselves, which helps us connect with others better. So there's this interpersonal benefit from taking care of us intrapersonally. He talked about the physical and mental benefits of, he said, moving around heavy shit, so lifting weights, and running, and how he lifts for confidence and self-esteem, but he runs for his sanity. My favorite quote from Sean in this episode, I don't think I've found that close of a connection anywhere but in those times when I've gone through suffering physically and then the clarity comes. He was talking about long running, endurance running. He quoted a lot from the book Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. I've read some of Michael Easter's other books, and yeah, highly recommend it. He talks about the benefits of getting uncomfortable physically and how that can really transform your entire life if you push yourself. And again, those interpersonal relationships will benefit from you pushing yourself physically, personally. Episode 4, Amber Maricini. Amber, I like to refer to her as a trust enthusiast. She works with organizations to help improve the customer experience. The key takeaway from me from our episode, all roads to the top of Maslow's pyramid, they have to go through trust. Trust, and trust is a spectrum, right? It's not a binary thing. It's not black or white. There is a range of trust that we have with every relationship. We even talked about the 50 shades of trust when she and I talked about this. When I asked if trust can be won back after it's lost, this is my favorite quote. She says, I think that there's always opportunity for it to be repaired, but it takes vulnerability, acknowledgement, and consistency in the behavior change. They're really hopeful words when we find ourselves needing to repair a relationship with a customer, with a colleague, or a personal relationship. Anyone in that boat? The book she quoted was Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. I've read this book before. It's a phenomenal book, and anything by Brene, highly, highly, highly recommend. Episode 5, we did something special. This is the toughest job market in recent history. And I think we all have a lot of colleagues, a lot of friends, a lot of maybe personal friends who are looking for, employment right now. So we wanted to take some time on the HumanUp imperative and really focus on how can we help those people who are in that position if we are not in that position right now. How can we help them? So part 1, we actually had 2 job seekers. We had Deb Dorsch and Bern Orton. So seeking jobs at the time of the discussion. Deb and Byrne talked about being so thankful for people who have created psychologically safe spaces for them, how important that is. And we go in the episode, we actually walk through kind of what does that look like? How do you create psychologically safe spaces for someone who is in a vulnerable spot in life, and for your employees and colleagues as well? Byrne also said, talking about how hard it is to wake up every morning, still trying to find a new job. He said, every day where I don't bring the toaster with me into the bathtub is a good day. Funny, but, speaks to how dark these days can be, right? And a lot of people are going through this right now during the holidays. So there's a lot we can do. My favorite quote actually from Deb. So I asked her, what emotions rise to the surface most for you during this job search process? And Deb said, frustration, sad, scared, angry. Loss of a job is like loss of a person, right? You go through Kubler-Ross's stages. I'm not at acceptance yet. I'm not there, but I'm also excited when I get the positive. Happy, particularly when a coworker tells me I landed a job, but yet also jealous because their journey's done, mine's still continuing. So, I'm not sure, Rex, that it's really one emotion. It's a gamut. And that could be all within a space of an hour of my day. So, all the emotions that people are going through when they're in this phase. The book, Byrne actually recommended the Titanic Survivors Book Club. Part 2 of the episode, we actually had 3 recruiters on, HR kind of employers, and it was Tim Shell-Tarbett, Jamie Masters, and Jeff Grant. This one, we really were digging into, again, how can we help these people who are job seekers right now? The key takeaway, really the importance of networking with other humans, and how this is important for all of life, not just when you're in the job search process. And Jeff really stressed that, building your network of other humans is important to do before you need to access that network. Do it right now. If you're not looking for a job, if you don't have a big LinkedIn network, a big network of people to bounce ideas off, to ask for help at some point in life, if you need it, do it. My favorite quote actually from Jamie, she says, "That's what I advise every person that calls," she's a recruiter, "every person that calls me that says, I just lost my job. I say, network, network, network. There's no person you can't shout to in your network or outside of your network. Let people know you're looking, because that's going to get you your next job." So, the importance of networking across life, really. Tim Shell actually recommended the book Red Helicopter. I actually read it after this episode, loved it. It's a great story about business, but also just about connecting with people and finding meaning. Great book. Episode 6, Subha Sayed actually reached out to me on LinkedIn a bit earlier in the year. She sent a link to a TEDx talk that she delivered. It was on the topic of unacknowledged grief, which hit home with me. It's something we don't talk about, obviously, and I suspect it hit home with more people than we would probably think. So we made a whole episode around it. We had a great discussion around it, a really helpful discussion around how to identify it in your employees, how to process it, how to get through it. So she walked through a 4-step process called ASMR: acknowledge the loss, seek support, mourn, and then create and complete a ritual. And she walked through how to do that. And her TED Talk's 15 minutes long, and it's so helpful around this as well. And no one really knows about unacknowledged grief. That's the whole concept, right? There's no public funeral to help you process a death. There's no line of people bringing you casseroles to help publicly sort of acknowledge this and process it. My favorite quote from her is this. We were talking about being authentic at work, like if you're facing something like this, and she said, "Being authentic is you showing up as the version of yourself that you would like to show and share to the world. If there's something that's private that you want to keep private, that's perfectly fine. When you're being inauthentic, that means that you're showing a version of yourself that's not true to you." And I don't think anybody would be happy doing that, or masking at work, or having it fit into a certain kind of mold because you think that's what people want you to be, or you think that's what you need to do in order to succeed. And she said this, "And as someone that's a person of color and a woman, and someone that's usually the only person that looks like me in a certain space, I can tell you that's very, very exhausting." Such a powerful episode. I loved the discussion. She made so many great points. The book she recommended, How Will You Measure Your Life? I've not read this yet, but it's high on my list. I've heard great things about it. Episode 7, Rich Schwartz. So Rich is an incredible storyteller and speaker in general. He works with pharma organizations to improve the customer experience. And he has so many quotes and great thoughts and recommended books in this episode. It was really hard to pick one of each. We talked about the payer, provider, and pharma space. He calls it pea soup, and how so many opportunities exist for the patient/member experience to be improved as they're swimming in that pea soup, or drowning sometimes in that pea soup. The key takeaway was essentially to not be a jerk, which was the advice he gave to his son on his first day of high school, which proved to be pretty good advice, and his son actually heeded it. And there's a great story in the episode about that. My favorite quote, I'm going to go with this. He says, "Yeah, I refer to it all the time as, it simply needs more gas." When he's talking about, an initiative or a person. And people are like, "You mean go faster?" I said, "No, it needs more gas." They say, "We need to set it on fire." I said, "No, gas is an acronym for gives a shit. Just need to show up like you really give a shit about this person. You really care about this person." That was the quote. He has all these, concepts and acronyms that he's come up with that he works with his clients on. And I think that really resonates, right? So your homework and my homework, right, to think about which of our relationships, including the ones we have with ourselves, right, that need more gas, especially as we head into the holidays into 2026. The book he talked about a lot of books, but we talked a lot about Compassionomics, talked way too much about it probably. I just finished the book and he leverages it a lot in his work. Phenomenal book for anyone in our space to understand kind of the business impact of compassion and having compassion in our work. And I think he actually says compassion is the more athletic cousin of empathy, because you're actually there, because compassion actually leads to action. So great episode. Episode 8, last episode, final episode of the year of season 1 was Rick Whitted. Rick, great leader, great communicator. He leads U.S. Hunger. He talks a lot about dignity and giving people a voice. He shared a powerful story about himself and why dignity is such an important word for him. He was 27, his wife was pregnant, they lost everything. He came home, there was a brown pantry box on his table that his grandma and his aunts brought, and it broke him. It's such a powerful story, and how it's shaped how he leads and how he lives. It was the perfect chemistry for him to lead U.S. Hunger through COVID, the pandemic, and through today. My favorite quote from Rick was, I think at the center of dignity is voice. Is it possible to provide someone dignity and yet not really have respect for them or what's important to them? Possible. Hard, but possible. Is it possible to dignify someone and to not give them voice? Is it even possible to humanize or human up a person and yet give them no voice? Such a great discussion around respect and dignity. The book he recommended actually is a book he wrote. So it's called Outgrow Your Space at Work. I've not read this yet, but it's another one that's on my list. I have a lot of respect for Rick, and I'm sure it's great. So that was season 1. Thanks to all our guests, all 12 of them. And Steph, I'm realizing we had 12 guests, right? So next year we need to have an advent calendar and have, you open the little door and there's a guest. But phenomenal, 8 episodes, 12 guests. And, speaking of Stefan, thank you, Stefan, for helping me give the HumanUp imperative life. And most of all, thanks to all you listeners. I get that you might think, and I sometimes hear, that this isn't really quality improvement focused content, which our listeners are, typically listening to which I would respectfully say I could not disagree more. This is the key to quality improvement. This is everything. Human connection is where all the secrets lie. And speaking of quality improvement, thanks to my entire team at RWC for sponsoring the show this year. Our firm consults with organizations to help improve quality, and we all believe that human connection, is the key. And on that note, I'm excited to actually announce that in 2026, RWC will be launching a podcast of its own called Beyond Quality. Each episode will include a different member of my RWC team co-hosting with me, along with an external guest, where we'll discuss a timely, relevant, important topic that we're facing in the quality improvement world. More information on that coming in the next few weeks, and I'm so excited about that experience. HumanUp definitely continuing 2026. We've already got our first few guests lined up. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks for showing up, for thinking deeply, for choosing to human up. As we step into 2026, my hope is that we all might see each other more clearly, hear each other more generously, and show up more courageously. Wishing you a very connected and a human up 2026. Happy holidays. We'll talk next time.